Right, this is the June 21st meeting of the Communications and Policy Committee of the Concord School Board. Start off by taking attendance. Mr. Richards? Here. Ms. Walsh?
Here.
Ms. Meeker?
Here.
And I'm here. So everybody is present. Also present with us are Karen Fisher-Anderson and Superintendent Murphy. We're going to review 4 policies this evening, I believe. Is that right, Karen?
Correct.
All right. And we'll start with policy 462. So go ahead and take it away. This is on background investigations and criminal record check.
Yep. As you all recall, we started on 462 during our last policy committee meeting, but we wanted to go ahead and bring in the volunteer policy as well, which is number 890, which is included in your package, to be sure that we were consistent with our terms of designated volunteers. Just as you, for everybody's recollection, we pretty much currently term all volunteers or require the same thing for all volunteers. Designated volunteers normally are those that, in the way it's defined in policy 890, have direct contact with students on a daily basis, meet regularly with students, they meet one-on-one, or they can be so designated by the superintendent. So when we worked on our volunteer policy back, it's probably 2 years ago now, March 1, 2021, the committee at that point took a stronger view and pretty much wanted everybody to go ahead and go through the background investigation. And so I was asked at the last committee to bring 890 before you so you could review that in conjunction with 462. 462 is background investigation criminal history records check. It is a priority required by law policy. We last updated this in December of 2021, so not that long ago. But the legislature's been very busy changing and updating some of the some of the things within this policy, and that's why it's before us again. Specifically, the highlights are, when starting out, one of the things is covered persons. It's not just employees. They wanted that firmly stated. It, as you see in our new policy sample, it's much broader than that. It does include the designated volunteers. It reaches applicants, contractor, their representatives, student teachers, short-term substitutes, coaches, and ironically, as I was going through one of the other policies tonight, service animals, it also talks and requires, believe it or not, a service dog handler to have a background check as well if they're going to be in the school working with kids with a service animal. So that was one of the big things about 462 updates, and I can, as we go through it, I can point out some of the other reasons it's being updated. Or let me just put them out there now. It used to be only the superintendent could review or receive the results of the criminal history records check, but now that's been changed such that they can delegate the function to the assistant superintendent, the business administrator, director of HR, or personal director of finance. So that's one of the changes. One of the other ones was greater mobility for bus drivers and monitors. It's now DOE's responsibility to provide records checked every 5 years for bus drivers and monitors. It doesn't cover, however, other non-Section 5 offenses, but we can do that if we wanted to on our own. So that's specifically discussed. Let's see. One of the other provisions in the amendment in this new policy over the old one is that we allow portability for 3 years of a substitute's criminal history records check. It doesn't really pertain to us, but if we had more than among districts within the same SAU, obviously we just have the one district subject to board approval. Let's see. Section 5 offenses are further delineated within the new policy. And then one of the things I wanted to get your guidance on is normally, I did shop this through our HR director, Michelle Guerin, and there is a provision in here that New Hampshire School Board has the individual paying the fees for the background check, and we've never done that. Usually it is the district, but I wanted to point that out as something you should all discuss. So there are some others that I can go through, but those were the reasons that we're here updating primarily this instruction at this time. So what you have in front of you is you have the current one, and then you have a copy with the red, which are the changes in light of the new policy, and also some inputs received earlier from Cara. And then I wanted to put that out, as I said, in conjunction with 890 for you to take a look at. I do have one suggested change for 890. But it's outside really the background investigation criminal record, so I'll bring that up after we're done on this piece.
Okay. All right. Comments, thoughts? Cara, you had some ideas?
Just at first glance, when we're talking about policy 890 and policy 462, they both have a definition of a designated volunteer, but they do not fully mirror each other.
Right.
Particularly number 4 says any other volunteer so designated by the school board or superintendent, and in 462 it just says the superintendent. It doesn't mention the school board. So we either, in my opinion, need to decide which way it's going to go, and then we need to amend either policy accordingly. I also noticed that the policy 462 has examples of designated volunteers for each of the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are not in 890. I didn't know if the examples were really, if they're necessary or if they're helpful, and if they are helpful, if we should incorporate them into 890 as well.
So what I normally do, just so you know, is I go into the New Hampshire School Board Association database and I use their, so let me show you just what, that is their go-by. And so I have in the past tried to do some more, as I say, I shop it out to people, the subject matter experts. So however you all want to do it, but that's how that one came out. But you're right, it's not, we can try and mirror it with a volunteer if you want to. Not all of it is applicable in the volunteer piece, but that's where it comes from.
But I think I agree with Cara that we should have one definition of designated volunteer.
Absolutely. Okay.
And frankly, I think if it was my choice, I would leave it to the superintendent to designate. I think it's going to be a very rare circumstance where the school board is going to want to be designating volunteers.
I agree.
The other thing that I kind of question just in reading 462, like if you look at number 4 on the first page, it talks about which contracts with an SAU, school district, or charter school. This is our school district policy. We're not a charter school, I'm not real sure what the difference is between an SAU and a school district, but as last I heard, we were SAU 8. So I would just, make it specific to us because it's our policy. I understand this comes probably out of the
And we, and our cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and custodial personnel are our employees.
They are.
Yeah.
They're not.
That's a good
Would
point.
there ever be a circumstance where they would be contracted?
Well,
They might be contracted, I would think, for school buses, for example.
Yeah, a couple of things. We do have private carriers for our school buses that are employees, but cafeteria and custodial are both ours.
Okay, so those
I
are.
had the same issue, but given it was just a definition, I
It
could
is just a definition,
Yeah.
but I mean,
Yeah.
if
No,
I
I
were
get it.
a member
I
of
had
the
the
public
same-
reading this, it's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, we're running charter schools, or, it's
Well,
just confusing.
Yeah,
you know?
and the reason the charter is in there is because some school districts run charter schools.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, when they did this, they made it a very general statement.
Yeah, I'd just
So-
eliminate or charter school.
Well, or I
Well-
could just say contractor which contracts with Concord School District to provide services.
And that'd be even
Yeah.
cleaner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's even better.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then, all right,
And we don't have to.
And I think that carries through in a couple different places.
Right, like 4D, charter school would have to be removed as well.
of the Concord School District, yep.
Do we usually say Concord School District, or do we say the district? Is that?
We always say, we can do it either way, and district is always capitalized, it has always been capitalized in the past.
I'm
But
sorry.
I mean, specific to Concord, it does say Concord School District policy at the top of the page, so if you just wanna go with district.
I mean, it's fine. I'm a stickler for consistency. So if we're gonna say the district elsewhere, then I think it's fine to say the district.
Okay,
in
so
that
on
particular
4
passage.
under contract, are we saying Concord School District or just cool school district?
I think Concord School
Concord School
District is better, actually. I mean,
Okay.
that's who we are. And actually, when I look at 4D, you know, any other direct service or services, I mean,
No.
if there's
Provide
one.
services including direct,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with Bob. It seems a little
Yeah,
not, if not
One,
redundant.
or maybe
just
more than one.
over.
but it, yeah, I mean, this, you could think of lots of people that would fall into that category, but I think it's,
And that's
it
the
might
other,
be better without the examples in this case.
yeah, that's the other question I have, you know, direct service. Who decides what that is?
it's like a nurse on a a child who has special needs for like an IP or whatever else, that would be a one-on-one
Yeah,
special.
but I mean, I, in a way, I think it's more like, in my view, it'd be better to say any other service specified by the superintendent, for example, or, you know, whoever you want to designate. I don't know.
It means any
But
private,
direct service, just to me, is like, what is that, you know? I don't know.
My interpretation would be someone who's directly involved with the students as opposed to someone who's in
Well,
a
yeah,
office somewhere
I get it.
grading.
I mean, this,
so-
any
But it's,
private business which provides services including, but not limited to, that could be the people who pick up our trash. That
Yeah.
doesn't specify people who come into contact, you know, provides direct services to students, maybe might wanna be whatever.
clearly, this is not a clear,
No, it's
Yeah.
not clear. I
Sentence.
mean, I think
Yeah.
it's
we're
more-
discussing it,
Maybe
and
that's
if
the
we're discussing
voluntary.
it, then
It's more like
parents and-
designated by, you know, the superintendent
Yeah.
or her designee. Because, you know, to a certain extent, custodial personnel don't necessarily directly deal with students. Especially the ones that work at night.
Yeah, overnight.
I don't know.
So contractor means a private business or agency or an employer employees of the contractor designated by the superintendent.
Can I ask where
I don't know where you are.
contractors come up again? Like, in the actual requirements of the check?
Well, for example, covered person means any employee,
Oh, so it's a definition within a
Contractor.
definition? I
Yeah.
see.
et cetera. I mean, those are the people that have to get their checks.
Yep, I see. So it's just to serve as the, to aid under covered person.
Yeah, I'm not sure they should have put definitions in limited to, you know, cause there's a lot of people that interact that are under contract, so. You know, just understand that isn't a list that's inclusive of everyone that does that.
I just
work.
want to make
not
sure, though, that we
limited
also comply with whatever the RSA says we
Right.
have to have in there. And
Does the RSA have a definition section?
I'm sure contractors listed in the RSA.
Right, cause I'm saying we can tweak it all we want, but if it doesn't mirror the RSA, then.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it
Right,
can mirror
what do we
it,
do?
but I think we can make it personal to us, too. I think, just, you know.
So this policy reflects the RSA.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so let me be clear, this isn't just, you know, it clearly picks up all of the things in the RSA.
Mhm.
That's why so many general statements, because when they write them,
Right,
it affects so many districts
right.
that look different than Concord.
I'm not checking my Twitter, I'm checking the RSA, I promise.
Yeah. Well, see, as I read that, my concern, it's like, this is limited to cafeteria workers, that's a person. School bus drivers, that's a person. Custodial personnel, that's a person. Any other direct services or services to students is not an individual. It's not naming a person, it's naming a service. I'd rather reword that to say any individual providing direct services to the students of the district or something like that. I just think it's
Yeah, it's a little
confusing.
nebulous.
Right, we're not doing criminal background checks on
I mean, like the
on
roofing
a
contractors.
business or an agency, we're doing
Yeah.
it on their employees. So it'd be contractor means an employee of a private
We're not gonna do background checks on the HVAC
Or
guys, or the roofing guys,
agency.
or
Right.
the paving guys.
Clearly that whole-
providing. Contractor means a private agency or employees of a private business or agency, comma, as designated by the superintendent, and then that gives her the authority to, if the HVA contractor is gonna be in the building during the school day and we
During school.
decide it needs to be done.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, I'm sorry, I lost you on that one, Pam, where are you?
So for contractor means an employee or employees of a private business or agency, comma, as designated by the superintendent, period, and then get rid of everything else,
If we can, and stay within the,
state law.
So, and contractor means an employee or employees of a private business or agency.
Yes,
Okay.
comma, as
Uh-huh.
designated by the superintendent.
would our cafeteria workers be the employees of a private agency? No, they're ours.
There are, so they're covered under
They're already
other parts of
covered.
the, they're covered under other parts of the
Right.
policy.
Okay, I get it. This is a definition of contractor, so
Yes.
we're not contracting those items.
Right.
Potentially,
we
could be.
were-
We potentially could be.
If we were, and then the superintendent could say those people are,
Mhm.
fall under this policy.
And you could do the same thing with custodians.
Mm-hmm.
You could have
Yeah.
a contract to do that, but obviously you don't, but some districts do.
Okay, so I want to make sure I get it perfect. Lastly, Pam, one last time, sorry.
Contractor
Yep.
means an employee or employees of a private business or agency, comma,
Yep.
as designated by the superintendent, period.
See, now I'm confused about as designated by the superintendent. Do you get involved in all the personnel? I mean, isn't that, I mean, every director seems to do their own contracting. But yeah, I guess you would designate through them,
Oh, right.
their
Well,
powers.
Well, I was gonna
Bottom
say,
line
I
is
think it's
that
the
I have to make sure
superintendent
that they're
or
all-
their
Or
designee.
their designee.
Yeah,
Right.
but I don't know that we need,
I have, mostly John, well, actually all of them, all
Yeah.
of them in some way use
Do.
contracted service, and so they know that all of them have to go through the process. Sometimes it's done by the agency, sometimes we do it.
So,
Which leads to number 7 also, where part D should be any other volunteer so designated by the superintendent or their designee, I think.
okay,
I would like to have a longer discussion about the volunteer section as it
Yeah.
relates to our
Yeah.
volunteer policy. Mostly because I think it doesn't relate to the reality of what we actually do, so I am uncomfortable. I think there's more types of volunteers than this policy and more gradients of what we should be doing, but I don't think we do. I've been volunteering in the school for 6 years. I've never been asked to sign a confidentiality agreement. Now, is that because I'm volunteering through the PTO? Although, as opposed to being a volunteer through a designated agency?
volunteer, only the volunteers who are specifically working with kids and have like access to the FERPA information are the ones who have to sign the designated agreements.
Okay.
But I think we have to be careful about getting too specific and trying to cover every instance. I mean, this thing will turn into a pamphlet.
Yeah, but if you have a policy that you don't follow, or you only follow parts of it that people don't understand, like, so right now, the principals at most of the schools, but maybe not all of them, because I think there's some, treat everybody who does anything for the PTO as a designated volunteer in terms of criminal background checks.
Right,
But not in terms of the other background checks called for in this, not in terms of training and not in terms of signing confidentiality agreements or any other things like that. So,
Yeah, I was a volunteer at schools, and I don't think I ever signed a confidentiality agreement. And then, according to the policy, all volunteers will sign a confidentiality agreement. So unless we say all volunteers except those that are, however, we're in violation, I have to admit here publicly that I was in violation of
Well,
that.
Yeah,
but it's designated volunteers.
but
Students,
what I'm saying is
teacher,
right now,
counselor.
every volunteer is treated as a designated
Well,
volunteer.
that's an interesting issue, because I mean,
Yeah.
if you read the last part of section 7, the administrative supervisor of the activity will decide who's a designated volunteer. I don't know
Right.
whether I like that or not. I mean, do I want some part-time coach deciding who's a designated volunteer? I'm not sure. Do I want, I don't know, somebody at the elementary school deciding who's a designated volunteer?
Well, it should be really the principals of the
It
schools.
should be the principals,
Yeah, and that's-
But it says
or the,
administrative supervisor.
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, the track coach can say,
They're not an administrative supervisor,
No, that would be the athletic director,
Okay.
right?
only the athletic director
Right.
or the
Okay.
principal.
I think
Yeah.
the
So we need a
message
definition for
I mean-
administrative supervisor.
from the last
Yeah.
time we looked at
I
this
know.
policy, the discussion at that time was, well, everyone should be a designated volunteer, and I think that's how most of the schools have been treating it, but only in terms of criminal background checks, not in terms of the rest of this. And so,
do we really want to have to run a criminal background check, though, on everybody who has any contact with kids?
If it's a one-on-one, we're supposed to.
If it's
Yeah.
a one-on-one, I
Yeah,
can see
if that
that.
tutors or even, what about chaperones that go on field trips overnight with kids? Certainly, yeah.
I mean, I used to ride the bus out to the ski area, and was in charge of the bus at Pat's Peak. I mean, I don't remember a background check.
well,
Right,
this is
right.
relatively
I don't know.
new. I feel like this is relatively new for both the legislature and
Yeah.
more enforced in this
But I mean, do
district.
we want to
I mean, the
require
bus
that?
one, the overnight chaperone, like, yes, the criminal background check, but the volunteer who is staffing a booth at field day,
Right, right.
or
Right.
the people who come and volunteer once a year,
It's expensive.
it gets expensive for us. It gets hard to get people to
To
do it.
Right.
And then, but
it
then it
takes
comes
time.
to these other requirements, like, which we don't do. There's no confidentiality agreement. There's no receiving orientation, on general job, general job responsibilities, information about school facilities. And maybe that's because some of these, we have like different types of volunteers. We have like the volunteers that the district asks for, like the call that comes out to like, can you be a volunteer reader in a kindergarten classroom, or
Right.
do you want to run a club, which is a stipend position, so that's different. And then you have like the PTO sort of designated volunteers, but then you have the schools will ask for chaperones for field trips.
Field day, popcorn.
Field day they ask. Well, popcorn is like in the PTO category, but field day, yeah. And so,
The ones who build the sets for the plays.
right. I mean, I will tell you that it gets, because I do the volunteer coordination at Chris McAuliffe, and it is really hard. And you will get people to sign up, and then you have to go through the list and say, I'm sorry, I thank you for being interested in volunteering, but you cannot volunteer, but here, go get your fingerprints done before the next activity, so hopefully you can. And it's easier now that it can be done at the central office. When it was getting a point, my mom had to go to Tamworth to
Yeah.
get her
It's
fingerprints done at one point.
Yeah, we're doing it a little bit
Yeah.
quicker.
So it sounds like you really want to spend more time on volunteers as far as that instruction goes.
Yes.
Because one of the things I did want to bring up is something that surfaced where under volunteer application and selection, they're 890. some language in there that talks about the building principal reviewing and approving volunteer applications, ensuring that there are no legal issues with regard to that. Something we need to be thinking about is there are some parents who are not allowed to be in the school due to court orders, so on and so forth. And that is something that should probably be addressed in the volunteer piece. But I guess my question is, do you feel that the volunteer instruction needs to be updated before you can even move on with the background criminal history? Because that's a lot more in depth beyond volunteers. Or do we just do that portion of like designated volunteers, get that covered, however you want to do it. But I think based on what I'm hearing is you really want to spend some more time on your volunteer instruction.
I think the big problem with the 462
Yep.
is the volunteer definitions and how it relates. That being said, like I'm mostly comfortable with the definition. It's in here of people that, yes, I think should go through background checks. However, there's other things in there about, or criminal background checks, there's other things about the training requirements that are in 462
Right.
that I wonder if that's reasonable or necessary for the library volunteer or the field trip chaperone. And I would probably just say field trip chaperone and not overnight field trip chaperone, but
Is that and that's the training that talks about the sexual abuse, making sure all of our, because I remember we had to incorporate that. And
yeah.
Is
I
that
did it.
required by law? The training?
Yes. It's now required that if you have, it is a new requirement, yes, for the designated volunteers.
So it sounds like to me that there is a potential ask here to create a new category for volunteers that don't need to meet the definition of designated volunteer. And as long as we stay consistent with the law, that maybe we can create
Yeah.
a new tier, which is like a community volunteer rather than a designated volunteer that doesn't need, like maybe has certain requirements just to make sure everything's on the up and up, but is not as extensive as fingerprinting, training,
Yeah.
confidentiality,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
What do you mean by making sure they're on the up and up?
Well, and that's the thing, we would have to workshop that, we would have to figure it out, because it sounds like,
Well, you're going right back to creating the same issues. I mean, how else do we know if somebody's legit if we don't have the criminal record check or the background check? So,
Right.
I
On the up
agree
and up
with
could
you
be-
that we don't need to do people that are out on field day, because we get 100 people out on field day. I went to some of the field days. There were parents everywhere.
right,
And they're there for that purpose and that purpose only.
right,
I just think that there are.
And you want to
there are-
encourage them to be there.
I want
Right.
them, but
Right.
and one principal was very excited that she had so many parents there,
Yeah.
which was awesome, but not to, they do know who should be in the building and who shouldn't. They have a list, so. And remember, we also have the system of Raptor. So you come into the building, you run your license through Raptor, and any kind of background comes up with that. So that's another layer of protection for those who may not have done the criminal record checks.
right.
Right.
So
So
perhaps
we do have that
Raptor
capacity.
is the threshold.
Right,
for
right.
a
And we've
volunteer
been,
that is not
we've
designated
had people come
volunteer.
in, didn't know them, they ran it through and caused us to be vigilant about whether
and
they
maybe
should be in
that's
the building or not.
appropriate, the appropriate level for the occasional
Right.
volunteer who is not one-on-one with students, the volunteer group events.
And
Yeah,
and I do think-
the direct, I'm sorry, Bob.
I was just gonna say, I do think there is a difference between a field trip chaperone who, goes down to the Science Center in Boston and comes back in the same day, and an overnight chaperone who goes to
Yeah.
Washington DC with the kids for 3
Well, I
days.
think there's
Or the
no
one-on-one.
way that we can create an exhaustive list.
Right.
Which is why
Right.
through the policy, we empower the superintendent or the administrative supervisor to step
Right.
in and say, hey, this isn't necessarily listed, but this is teetering over into what I would consider a designated volunteer position, so I'm gonna make that call. And if that's in policy, then I think we're safe. So, I mean, I like the idea of it. I mean, I love the idea of being more inclusive and reducing barriers to participation, as long as everyone also feels that due diligence has been done and that the children are safe in their school. So if there's room there, if there's wiggle room there, then I think I'm happy to workshop that or draft something.
And I get your, there a difference, except I think like in a field trip environment, you can end up with adults having one-on-one contact
Sure.
with students in a way that,
The bathroom.
the bathroom,
Yeah, the bathroom. There's-
the ski trip,
Yeah.
I mean, the ski programs are so busy that, but, so, I mean, I feel like we could leave that to the superintendent, or we could just say, come in contact with students on a predictable basis, or meet with students on a one-on-one basis, or could meet with students.
I would prefer that the field trip, people who go on field trips with groups of children, because they're often off by themselves.
Yep.
A field trip, you're gonna go in this section of the museum and we're gonna go over here. My recommendation would be to have people who go on field trips go through the process.
Okay, so,
And of course of course it includes overnight.
yeah.
But it's the ones that are just coming in once in a while to do a task that doesn't require,
And are those people that you want, because then there's the other parts of it, that you're gonna do this other background investigation on, and you're gonna require training? Or, because,
We've gotten away from training, but this district was doing training.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID,
Yep.
I know that, they were doing training, and so one of the things that we need to come back and do is to do training, and I did it when I was a principal, we brought in all the volunteers and we had a training. And we talked about confidentiality and what to do in case you have, if a child discloses, cause sometimes they'll disclose to a volunteer, and what do you do around that, and how do you handle it? So I think the training piece is important. I think we should be running training. Maybe we just do a video and we send,
that was how,
we don't
they
have to-
did do, when they put the policy in place, I think
Right.
they had us do it.
think
I don't know
we
if
need to
anyone checked if we did
honestly,
it.
we need to get back to that.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
My only cautionary note is if we make that a requirement, then we actually gotta do it. Or
We
else
gotta
we're
track
gonna,
it.
Yes.
or we're gonna
And
hang
track it.
ourselves on our own petard,
And track
you know?
it.
Right.
And we have to track it.
Because the first time it turns out that somebody didn't get training,
Well, and you have incoming all the time, so maybe it's a quarterly
It's
thing, or,
constant,
yeah,
so
I remember, yeah.
In order to be a volunteer, you have to watch this video. I
And
mean, that's.
certify
I mean,
or-
Yeah.
In order to do certain
fine.
volunteer
Right,
activities.
Right. Like a field trip or, working with a youngster in small group or one-to-one or whatever. It's really was meant to be that time.
And, I mean, there's a lot of, not that I wanna spend more money, but, there's a lot of technology out there that has accountability measures where if someone did or did not watch a
Yeah.
video, scroll down a form,
We have
acknowledge,
that, we have that in the
Yeah.
district, when I did the suicide training, knows best, I forget the name of the program we have. It recorded that I finished, and then, Janine, who took care of all the wellness stuff, she knew who did and who did not. We know when, there's a training on fishing, we know who did and who didn't do the training, so we have that capacity.
yeah.
So, we'll know who's on that list, and each building can be done, these lists done by a building. So I agree, there's good technology, and they don't have to come into the school and sit down and have a training, they can watch something on.
Yeah.
Ironically, since we're talking about the designated volunteers, under 576, our service animals in school, one of the policies we're looking at tonight, I just wanted to let you know that under that instruction, one, they have to be registered, either the handler, the service animal trainer, or the parent guardian who comes into the school with a dog or animal, has to be approved by DOE and has to have a state criminal background check. And, so
Approved by DOE.
that's another one where the list can be hard to come up with because
Right,
it's,
and that's the thing, like.
yeah.
And also, we shouldn't try to be exhaustive
No.
in our examples, because then it pins us in. So DOE has their own requirements. for-
Chuckling over here because
yeah.
the DOE is now backing out. They were going to do the bus drivers and the bus driver monitors.
Yeah.
And we just got word that they're not gonna do that. It's going back to the districts. So they did not have the capacity to do that work and realized it after,
So we'll be looking at that
Yeah.
legislative
Yeah,
yes,
later
we'll
down
be
the road.
looking at that. You know
Yeah.
what,
Okay.
I thought about that today when we talked.
Yeah,
So paragraph 2B on page 3, then, that's what you're talking about, the DOE is supposed to do it. We're gonna have to change that.
Correct. It's gonna change, and I just got that. Did you get that?
I hadn't
No,
seen
I
it
did.
yet.
I just
No.
got it.
And that's one of the big changes that just came through after, in this new
After
sample.
they said they were gonna do it?
Yeah,
Cool, cool, cool.
and they were gonna pay for it and then track it, so,
I'll get updates
Okay.
on all the policies, changes from the legislature at my workshop in the end of the
Yeah.
month, at the superintendent's meeting.
So do we need to put 576 on hold until we know what those, or do we wanna move forward?
You know,
Well, I mean, we wanna have this in place. I'm not sure if there's something else, but I would recommend that you move forward, have something in place, and if we have to amend it, we can bring it back.
something minor, yeah, cause
Yeah.
462 is they're fairly significant edits
Yeah.
throughout the policy. As I said, the last time we updated it was in 2021, December 2021.
And if we have any policies we bring to our July meeting, the second reading and approval will be in August, which will be just in time
Just
before
in time for
volunteers
school.
come into school at the end of
Yeah.
August, so.
yeah.
On 462, if I could propose some edits on section 7.
Section 7.
Additional criminal record checks, is that what you?
No,
Designated
designated volunteer, just based on our,
Sorry, back in the
Discussion.
definition section, A7.
Oh, A7, I'm sorry.
A7.
Okay.
Are you talking at the bottom of page 1?
I'm
Yeah,
talking about the
designated
page
volunteers.
one.
Yep, and it, right now, looks like it is consistent, comes in direct with 890, at least A is, and meets regularly with students, that's consistent with so right now, 462 and 890 share the same language.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was just gonna propose, based on the discussion we just had, designated volunteers, any volunteer who A, comes in direct contact with students, such as a field trip chaperone. Delete B and change it to who meets with students on a one-on-one basis without the presence of a teacher or other professional staff member, such as a community mentor, volunteer assistant coach, or any other volunteer designated by the superintendent
Or their designee.
or their designee.
Or their designee.
Okay, so
One more time.
A.
Sure, I should just keep my computer out.
I
and do
know, we
this
should
as
be,
I go.
we should be making these edits
Um,
live.
designated volunteer is any volunteer who A, comes in direct contact with students, such as a field trip chaperone. Although that doesn't work, because you can come in direct contact with students so designated volunteer is any volunteer who may meet with students unsupervised by a teacher or other professional staff member, including field trip chaperones, community mentors, volunteer assistant coaches. And then B, any other volunteer designated by the superintendent. Because that's what we're talking about, people who are not supervised by teachers or staff, right? So,
Yeah, the one-on-one.
So my only question is, say we have someone who is supervised by the teacher or staff, meets regularly with the child, and they would not be a designated volunteer and not be subject to the requirements there. What if the teacher goes to another one?
I think if they're possibly meeting one-on-one, then they,
who may meet one-on-one, so I think that
Okay.
would
but this is-
include,
But maybe one-on-one without, I think didn't you say that without the presence of a teacher?
yeah.
well, but that's one-on-one.
Or we could get rid of about volunteer who may meet with students without the presence of a teacher or other professional staff member. So it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be one-on-one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So that would be anyone who could possibly, so it could be a tutor who gets left alone in the classroom.
Anyone who
Yeah.
the teacher may walk out of the classroom
Classroom.
and be unsupervised
Yeah.
for a while.
It wouldn't, a tutor has to do that. We hire tutors.
Yeah.
that's it.
But like
yeah,
a volunteer.
volunteer who just reads to the kids,
Kids,
or
yeah.
goes over the reading, or does the flashcards with
Yeah.
them, and
And then any other
Right.
volunteer said designated by the superintendent or their designate.
And as long as that meets the requirement of the
Like
RSA
that.
and the legislature.
Well, it sounds like we get to define designated volunteer by the RSA. We just have to designate.
yeah.
Okay.
But I think that is the intention. It's people who are going to be possibly alone with a kid or a small group of kids.
That was always the intent of it, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Always.
Okay, so for 7, I have designated volunteers, any volunteer who may come in direct contact with students on a predictable basis, or,
Who may come in contact with students without the presence.
oh, so we're getting rid of A.
Getting rid of
Yeah.
everything and doing a rewritten A and B.
Wow. I think we really need to look at the definition, because we can make it more, we can always make our policies more strict, but we need to start with the floor, the foundation, and I'm afraid that we're taking a lot of
So
the,
where is the
Foundation.
RSA that, where is the
I'm
foundation
I'm
that we
reading
need to
it
be
now.
doing?
yeah.
Where did I have that now? Oh, shoot, I left it at home.
Yeah, I'd have to put mine out too.
Because I was looking at Teams.
Yeah, it's not in team, we have to go right to the RSA.
Well, I was reading on Teams and I have to use the school district laptop to do that.
Okay, just, were you able to get it, Kara?
Yeah, I've got it, but I don't see in 189.13A, B, or C a definition of designated volunteer. I only see public academy defined, so I'm looking into perhaps the 189.1 has like a general definition section. I'm just looking.
Yeah, it says right here, RSA 189.13 does not define designated volunteers. What volunteers are, and then it says what volunteers are required to have back. Rather, the statute requires local school boards to define that category. A board could have a narrower, less protective definition, and then it says in parentheses, not recommended, or a broader, more protective one.
No, you're
But
right.
what, but it
So
doesn't
they
define.
they don't define
They don't
designated
define it.
volunteer.
So yes,
So,
you can.
you,
make it
I
up.
guess you
We
can.
can have our tiers.
You can have, so you want designated volunteers, any volunteer who may meet with students without the presence of a teacher or other such professional staff member, such as, field trip volunteers, mentors, community, whatever, from above.
Coaches,
Yep.
assistant coaches.
And then any other volunteer so designated by the superintendent or their designee.
Mhm.
Does that work for you, superintendent?
Okay.
Because that really was always the intent, that the volunteer was, there was a supervisor there, there was a certified teacher with them, or a supervisor, and not leaving people alone. It's always the
Okay, so-
intent of it.
Becomes A.
So then
And then
the
B.
final paragraph may not be necessary if designee
final paragraph are you talking about?
After, so 7A, B, C, D, and then there's
That
a
paragraph, yeah.
conclusive
yeah,
paragraph.
Yeah,
The administrative
But if-
supervisor? That
Yeah,
one?
we can get rid of that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Okay,
Because
Get
it's
that
covered
out.
in
Yep.
D.
okay. Deleted.
we have a, administrative council retreat in mid-August, so, 9, 10, 11, so this policy would be a really good one to have to go over. Karen, did we put this on the list today?
We did not, yes, 462, we talked about it with a volunteer, but it's not yet.
Because all the principals, assistants, everybody will be there.
Yeah, and they should have a consistent training program.
Yeah.
So,
I do agree that an online training program would be
Yeah.
ideal.
Okay, so we're gonna try to move forward with a rewritten version of this
I will move
The July
policy
meeting?
462 with the edits
for a first reading.
discussed tonight to a first reading.
I'll second that.
Second and fall.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Yes, did you?
Sure,
Oh,
yeah. I have other
I'm sorry.
I have technical edits that I would like to
Oh,
propose,
Okay.
but I'm not
sorry.
gonna.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm happy to.
Can you just get
do-
those to us and
Yeah.
we'll make that change, and then when we do second read, we can,
I'll just, I'll have.
or else, yeah. Are they just technical, grammatical, pronoun
Yeah,
use?
like, for instance, sometimes we use quotes around defined terms, sometimes we don't, sometimes there's a lack of periods at the end of a sentence. Just keeping it technically clean, I think would be great to have it,
I'm fine with you
doing
Yeah.
all of that.
working
So
with
if
the
you
administration,
Feel free to work
you
through it.
send
making those
those-
technical edits prior to the first
If you
reading.
would send those to me,
Yes,
Kara,
of
and I
course.
will take care of them.
Okay,
And Bridget and I will go through them and make those changes, okay?
thank you.
So we already started talking about 890, the volunteer one.
that wasn't really to be updated, it was more for but we certainly can. It was more for the definition of designated volunteer to get the discussion
Right.
and the consistency.
Right. The only thing that I picked up on that, again, was number 4 on page 1, and designated
Right, was the
volunteers
school board.
about the school board. I just assume keep us out of it.
Yeah.
But I would recommend that we amend the definition of designated volunteers to match the one we
Yeah,
just
be
approved.
consistent.
Yep,
If we could be consistent, that'd be
you
great.
got it.
So is that in the form of a motion, did I hear?
Well,
We haven't been moving every consideration.
Well, it sounded like
Yes.
it made sense.
Yes.
let's hold on the motion though
Yep.
till, anybody else have any other thoughts or concerns about?
I have a few other
Okay,
things, which is, in designated volunteers, we have sort of this background check sentence twice. So I would move the bottom sentence to, or get rid, I would get rid of the first sentence under designated volunteer. Go designated volunteer means any volunteer who, use the definition from 462. And then designated volunteers are subject to provisions of policy 462.
yeah, I was gonna say, maybe, I think that's a good move, just, instead of repeating comes in direct contact, et cetera, it's consistent with the definition in 462.
Oh, you want to I was going to just copy the definition, but we could,
Well, we can do that, I
We
guess.
could do that, but I like the consistent with.
yeah.
That way, if we
But the-
change 462 again, then we don't have to come remember to change 490 again.
The only
But
problem
then
is-
again, they have to go back and forth, the reader does.
Yes, so if a parent
Yeah,
wants to
okay.
check.
That's true too.
So,
Um,
I'm sorry, Pam, I didn't mean to.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah,
So we're gonna incorporate what we had in
yeah, so
462
let's incorporate
into
462
this. Okay.
into
For,
here.
for the
Alright.
definition, and then,
Definition of
and then
designated.
we're eliminating I know you said they said the same thing. There was a sentence in there you wanted eliminated.
So the first sentence.
Yep, where it says will be required to undergo a background.
Yes, eliminate that because we say it at the end of that section.
Okay, got it.
And I guess the question is, do we want to add here, under designated volunteers, the requirement about signing a confidentiality agreement? Are we going to enforce that?
Well,
And
I have just a question overall, and that it lists as designated volunteers for this, and then for the remainder of this, we just say persons
Right.
wishing to volunteer for the
Oh, yeah.
district. Are they undesignated volunteers?
I haven't gotten there yet.
Designated volunteers?
Yeah, no, I
But,
agree.
yeah. And do they have to sign who signs the confidentiality agreement?
Usually it's the ones that are doing, the designated volunteers who are the tutors, or they have access to educational record material. So they're working with kids and they know about issues, learning IEPs, 504s, all those kinds of things, discipline.
Well,
So,
as I read that though, Jim, persons wishing to volunteer, that means somebody says, I'd like to volunteer at the district. The district then gets to decide whether they're a designated volunteer or not.
That is, but then everything that says volunteers after that are not designated volunteers. They're any volunteers that may or may not be designated. So all of these things, such as confidentiality agreement, will apply to them. And so I just want to be clear that do we want to separate these?
There can be volunteers who are not designated volunteers because they're never going to be alone with the kids.
Mhm.
Well, and I think there's
So at this point, those volunteers would be required to sign a confidentiality agreement because all volunteers are required to sign.
well, and they'd also be required to sign to do a volunteer application. And
I got to warn you, this is not going to happen in the real world.
No, it's not. That's why I'm bringing it
well,
up.
you do have to do the volunteer application now to do the background check, but I think it goes back to what kind of there are different. So I feel like some of these standards apply to the designated volunteers, and then we do need another category of occasional other volunteers, either for the school directly or through the PTO or other community organization. And do we want to say they have to, go through the Raptor process?
non-designated.
Non-designated volunteers, yes.
What really concerns me is if we make this
It's getting
Too-
complex and
too
they're gonna-
complex and
they're
too
gonna-
difficult. Number one, we'll discourage people from volunteering, and number two, we won't do what is required, and then we'll be in trouble when something happens.
Yeah, my only point is if we have the policy that says all volunteers will sign a confidentiality agreement, then all volunteers will have to sign
Right.
a confidentiality agreement.
Do you want to say all designated volunteers?
I'm just,
Yeah.
that one,
I would move that under designated
Yeah, I would agree.
volunteers.
I would have that be, and I don't know if there's others in here that, any other items. That's probably the one I would move under, because all volunteers, whether they're just occasional and non-designated, will receive orientation, including general job responsibilities, information about school facilities, routines and procedures, including safety and evaluation, work schedule, place of work, and expected relationship of regular staff. That's an awful lot for the occasional person, but I just get concerned that if we have a policy and we say, oh, well, even though the policy says that applies to everybody, it doesn't, because now it becomes a very.
Well, and that is where we are
Yeah.
right now,
That's
which is
where
we're
we are right now.
enforcing, and it became, because it's complicated, we ended up saying, well, we're just gonna require background checks
Mhm.
on everybody, and then ignore the rest.
It got crazy though,
No, I don't wanna become
yeah.
so bogged down that we end up with no volunteers.
Right.
Right,
And in
And
that
some
case,
of them got frustrated
so then
about it.
just take all volunteers out and just say volunteers designated by the superintendent will receive, or selected by the superintendent will
That's
have
what
to
should be
sign
said.
a
The
confidentiality agreement, so.
The designated volunteers as part of the application process shall be shall sign a confidentiality statement, because they're the ones that are working directly with the
Okay.
youngster. And they're the ones that have the knowledge. If I'm cooking popcorn or doing, the egg race at the field day, I don't really, can't, I suppose I could say they dropped the egg, but, I mean, the reading, the math, being with the kids,
Yeah, those are.
Those are
but-
the
but
things
but
that-
are the people that are supervising the egg race, are they volunteers?
they're volunteers.
So they gotta sign a confidentiality
No,
agreement?
I'm saying that
So-
they're not designated.
So I would suggest that on the top of page 2 of that, we just put all designated
Right.
volunteers. We'll
Yeah.
sign, and then we can go down all the other little things and say, hey, does that need to have a clarification, or can we just leave it?
Well, I guess, do we need a volunteer application form and selection process?
Yeah, the reason I think you do is because that's one of those things where the principals should be making sure they're looking at what's in Power School, and some parents can be there and some parents can't. They can't be there at the same time. You have restrictions by
Okay.
parental plans, so on and so forth.
So, all volunteers need to fill out the application.
Okay.
Absolutely,
If they're
that would be
cooking
one.
popcorn at the movie.
Just
on-
fill out the application.
Fill
and
out
then-
the
right.
application.
Does the application exist?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's right behind them.
And
Policy.
Can we then run everybody, do we wanna say that we're gonna run them through Raptor? What does Raptor flag for us?
It'll flag, anything that's recorded on their record,
Like criminal record?
criminal record, like, you know, if there's an issue around sexual misconduct or,
DUI.
no, I don't think
No.
DUI.
But
No.
that
It's
DUI
would
is
be
not
under
is
under-
not, something that,
It's not section 5.
it
Right.
doesn't
No, it
prevent you
doesn't.
from working
It
in
No,
the
has to
school.
be
doesn't.
under that
It's a
section with
five.
all
So it's
Yeah,
section
section
I
5.
understand,
You know,
thank you.
violence, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
You know, the other one that bothered me a little bit when I read this is down at the bottom of volunteer application and selection. A volunteer may be asked to terminate their service when circumstances in the judgment of the administrator necessitate termination. Why can't the administrator just fire them? I mean, what if the volunteer says, no, I'm not going to terminate my.
Which one
What-
were you, I'm sorry?
Well, we just do
Final
The
a waiver.
last paragraph,
Yeah.
right before volunteer duties on the first page. A volunteer may
A
be
volunteer's,
asked
a
to
volunteer's services may be terminated when circumstances in the judgment of the administrator.
Yeah,
It
you
should
can
be
be
the way it should
terminated.
be. We're not asking
We're
them
not
to-
asking you to be
Right,
terminated.
I agree. I mean,
That's-
we're gonna ask you to terminate your services. No, we're gonna terminate your services because
Thanks.
you yell
You're
and
done.
scream. I agree.
I think that just was in there to soften it a little bit, to
Right.
be
But-
honest with you, but it's,
Like you're gonna be
it
asked
happens,
to go
it
home.
happens. We've
Yeah.
had principals who have asked volunteers not to.
I'm not sure I want to soften, I guess my point.
Okay.
So I would
So it
change
should just say a volunteer.
to may be terminated
Terminated.
when circumstances in the judgment of the administrator necessitate termination.
Got
I
it.
leave it just
Yeah.
straight to that.
Okay.
Okay, so
okay.
what do we do with, we moving this one forward?
Pam still has a couple.
I still have a
Okay.
couple, sorry. So, first paragraph under volunteer application and selection. Parents wishing to volunteer, persons wishing to volunteer at the district, including through a parent-teacher organization or other organization, should complete a volunteer application form, blah, blah, blah. Do we want to say as part of that process, they should submit their driver's license, or have their, as part of that process, the building.
The Raptor check.
I don't know how to describe it. Their driver's license should be scanned into,
You don't have a
So let me
driver's
ask
license.
about, what about our
those that don't have a driver's
foreign,
license.
yeah.
Yeah, as I say, our
So if I'm coming
new
into,
Americans.
Yeah, we do.
We
when
do.
I'm into the school, they ask for my ID. If I don't have an ID, am I not allowed to be?
You might have you'd probably have your form for when you came in as a refugee, or a passport or
do.
some other form.
We
But they-
still do a Raptor check on everybody if they have a driver's license or not.
If they're coming in as a subcontractor or something like that, we would, but I don't know about just a parent who doesn't have a driver's license. I don't think
Yeah,
so.
we look for another form of.
Yeah, so
I
that,
was
yeah,
gonna say,
that
why don't we
form.
just say appropriate ID?
They-
Yeah.
I
As
was
part
just
of that
wondering-
process, they should,
But we
the-
do a Raptor check on people, even if they don't have a driver's license, right?
Well, it's the driver's license that triggers it, Jim.
Right,
So
usually.
in other words, if I walked into the high school and I went to that little person up there and said, I'm going to go visit, I need to go talk to the cafeteria people because I sell tomatoes for whatever reason. And they say, do you have a driver's license? I say, no. They just give me a tag and I go away there. Because right now, they scan my license, it verifies that I've been, that I'm in there. I'm just curious.
that I'm a
because-
designated volunteer.
Because otherwise, I mean,
So,
if I was up to no good, I'd come in and say, I don't have a driver's license, and then just go in.
well, so people wishing to volunteer, including through a parent-teacher organization or other organizations, shall complete a volunteer application form. As part of that process, the district shall verify their identification.
I think I'd just put an ID verification on that.
I mean, when somebody comes into this office to see me and we don't know who they are, they don't get very far.
Yep.
I mean, they get to the office and that's it, and then they're escorted to wherever they need to be, so.
Okay.
Jim, I'm gonna say the same thing happens at the high school or in a school where we have a stranger, we just don't say,
Okay.
go sell your tomatoes up to the cafeteria.
I would be escorted by
Yeah, I mean,
someone, that's
somebody
fine.
has to check that, I mean, we just,
So if a volunteer comes in and didn't have an ID or so, they would not be allowed to volunteer unless someone
well,
escorted
yeah,
them?
unless we knew who they were,
Okay.
and then
I
the
just wanna-
principal made
I think that's a good
good visual
thing to
contact
say, as long
with
as
them,
that
or the,
doesn't
more the secretary.
discriminate
They're the
against
ones that
our
know
Yeah.
everybody.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, is we wanna make it welcoming, just because you don't have a driver's license.
Well, that's why I
Right.
said
You know, an
identification.
ID,
Yeah.
you'd have a
Just
passport
some
or
kind
a-
of verification of
Yeah.
who that person
But
is.
you know, I refer to the administrative assistants as our gatekeepers. They are clearly our gatekeepers. They know everybody and they know how to handle those unknowns.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I'd put a ID. And then it becomes the question of what's an acceptable ID, but that's a whole nother story.
some of our
Right,
new
right.
families
Discussion
have
of
these
that.
new forms that show us that kind of
Right.
information, but we can't use those in a Raptor or anything else. We don't know.
So the sentence, shall I read it back what I have?
Sure.
Okay, I've got persons wishing to volunteer at the district, including through PTO, and I'll spell that out, or other organizations shall complete a volunteer application form as part of, period. As part of the process, the district shall verify their identification.
Great.
And get rid of describing their skills, interests, and
Yeah.
availability, and such forms will be
Yeah.
made available at the okay.
The fourth paragraph, the last sentence, I'm not sure what we mean by this. Exceptions would be district-wide programs established by the administration whereby general volunteer programs would be defined. General volunteer qualifications or training would be defined. I'm just not sure what general, like, what that means.
Well, it means, I mean, the first part talks about the building principle
Yeah, no.
being the training. So I
Yeah.
mean, if you wanted to volunteer at White Farm, that's district-wide, so there's no building principal that's gonna tell you how to volunteer, right?
Right, it's more the whereby general volunteer programs would be just defined, like, is it, exceptions would be district-wide programs where the superintendent or their designee will define, set training standards? Is that what we're trying to say there?
Yeah, maybe.
Are the exceptions that,
Well, I think what they're saying is for a program that's not in the building, that there would be a set of general expectations around all the programs that we hold. And I think White Farm is a good example. We have lots of programs over there. C has lots of activities with the kids in the science area that they're not in the building. They're over at the complex, the White Farm complex.
So maybe you
So-
just stop after the word administration.
I would leave it there.
Yeah.
and cut that last
That works.
phrase out.
Cut the
Yeah,
last phrase.
that's what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
you know, under the leadership of the
Doesn't really make
building
sense,
municipal
does it?
exceptions would be a district-wide program established by the administration.
Period. Yep.
Period, yeah.
I mean, we have programs over at Second Start, you know, and so
Yeah.
we may have some folks over there that are helping out, so we, you know, we don't necessarily have the same expectation. Well, we all have expectations, but, you know,
Yeah.
they're gonna have general rules.
But it's not tied to a particular principle
Right.
of the school.
Right.
The question I have on that is does this exceptions would be district-wide programs, are they accepted from training or accepted from the, I might just say district-wide programs, district-wide training programs will be established by the administration, period.
Where the administration will establish the training standards.
Yeah.
So
I
we
would
don't
just-
have
I get
district-wide.
that
so we'll-
exceptions thing is
Yeah.
confusing.
Yeah.
And I just come straight
Oh,
out
yeah.
and say.
Oh, yeah, district-wide programs will,
be,
the,
training programs will,
or the superintendent or their designee will
designee.
set training standards for district-wide programs.
that works too. I'm happy
And
with
then
that.
it's in the active voice and not the passive voice.
Okay,
Okay.
Karen, did you get that?
I think so. Let me just try this back to you. Okay, so we get down to the very last, let's see. Exceptions would be district-wide programs established by the administration, period. The superintendent or designee will set training standards for district-wide, and then
So I think we're getting rid of the exceptions
Exceptions,
paragraph
etc.
and
That
replacing it
sentence.
with the
Okay.
superintendent or their designee will set training standards
Yeah.
for district-wide programs.
got it. Okay, district-wide programs. Okay. Okay. The training shall be developed on the leadership of the building principal, and then we say on the next line, the superintendent or designee will set training standards for district-wide programs? For
Yes.
district-wide, okay,
That's-
all right.
All right, that's all I got.
Anything else?
Because
All right,
Gina's
so
probably gonna come back and
do,
haunt me, but,
We're gonna try to push this forward for a first reading too?
yes, we
Okay,
wait for
so-
Cara to come back.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just saying, you already have 4 policies on your July agenda for second reads, so.
This is
let's-
just a
This is a
first
first
reading.
read,
All right, well, I'm just
yeah.
warning
you-
you.
You said
So-
you wanted these for your August retreat.
So,
I know, but I'm just worried that we're gonna get buried, but
Well,
if it's only a first
it's a
reading.
first
I don't-
read and
I
the,
don't think people are gonna.
I have
worry about it.
faith in our,
We're gonna read
I
it.
have faith in our committee chair for pushing this through quickly.
Okay, all right,
Oh.
I'm just trying to
Good.
give you some heads up.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
so I'm gonna move, that we move this forward to a first read. Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, Pam seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Any opposed? No.
all right.
All right, now we get to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they're pretty, the 2 remaining, service animals in school and therapy dogs. When I first pulled these, I was like, why do we have 2 separate that are so similar? But unfortunately, because therapy dogs are specifically excluded as service animals.
Right.
So that's why we have 2 separate policies. And just so you know, the 576 is priority required by law. I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep, and 790 is optional. So, under the direction of the service animals, 576, it says if you want to do a separate therapy dogs, go at it, it says it more articulately than that, but basically you can develop that separately, which is what was done back in, it appears, 2019. So the changes that you see, I went and I compared them with what is at the New Hampshire School Board Association. They're mostly, it was format and grammatical stuff. I did not know whether or not service animals, they list miniature horses, which I was fascinated by.
Yeah,
me too.
I like the miniature horses and
Yeah, I
the
thought-
fact that they can be housebroken. I
Yeah, I
think that
thought,
is
yeah,
really interesting.
I was like, really like, wow.
Is that required?
They don't fall within the statutory definition of a service animal, no.
Why is it in there?
Well, I guess they have proven to be good service animals, or they've been used in the past.
So,
I
but
can't
in-
imagine them
But
going up
no,
and.
but
Has
they're
this
not,
been
they're
on
not
our
therapy
policy?
animals.
They're not designated
They're
as,
service animals, which I presume means that maybe they pull somebody's wheelchair or
Could be,
something.
could be, but I can't imagine them in the high school. I mean, there's stairs, there's,
I can't imagine them in
In
any,
the house.
in any school.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say the same thing, Bob.
Yeah.
So what are the, I have two
And if
printouts,
you
but they're
have
the
this in your
same.
policy, then somebody could say, I wanna bring my miniature horse to
And you get to tell them
Even
no.
Meadow.
yeah,
But
Pam,
don't-
they accidentally got, we had looked at that twice. I don't know if, the copy twice, we don't know if it
Okay,
was
but
just.
it's just the reds that are different?
It's just the reds.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it got, by some strange reason, we copied it twice.
So,
So just to be clear though, that the difference between therapy dogs, they're kind of like emotional support animals versus service animals, which I would consider more like
I pulled the statute
dogs,
for you.
dogs for
Yep.
blind or hearing impaired or.
Yeah, and it says, they are trained to do work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including physical,
Right.
sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disability.
Okay.
So,
There's a great one
defined by
at Beaver
statute.
Meadow. There's a what the counselor at Beaver Meadow brings-
therapy
has a
dog.
therapy dog.
Well, I mean, it seems to me that just about,
We also have dogs that do, that, help youngsters with type 1 diabetes.
Yep, they
Mhm.
smell.
Wouldn't they be under service dogs though?
those would be
Those
service
are
animals.
service
animals.
Ther-
Yeah,
Therapy
I'm talking about
dogs are
service.
more like,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought we were still on surface.
I
by
thought-
Therapy
36.
dogs are like the ones that go to the hospital and make the kids feel
Right.
good.
Right, or if you had a child with sexual trauma, that,
Yeah.
you know, a comfort animal
Yeah.
there.
Well, our
Right.
police
Right.
department has a dog.
Right.
so the miniature horse, the superintendent decides whether it is applicable. But there's a whole, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me that
yeah,
how that got in there in the first place, because
So-
it says it's not under state or federal
But these
statutes.
look
No.
like very minor
Yeah, they're-
changes.
There, they were,
Yeah, they
I mean,
look-
it was,
This was, these two policies were, requested by a board member to review. And when we get to the next policy, we can explain that it really had to do with the insurance.
okay, so,
Okay, so that's why this is on the agenda, cause it was brought up, by one of your colleagues.
does anybody have, so looking at 576, the first one, I have no problems with this.
Happy to move this for
No,
first
I
reading.
don't either.
Kara?
Is that a,
All right, I will make a motion to move it to first reading if you don't want to, or I'll second it, however we want to do it.
Go for it.
All right, I move that we take Concord School District Policy 576 as proposed to us today and recommend it to the full board for approval of the first reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Well, let's talk about therapy dogs.
Therapy dogs.
yep, and a lot of the same, that obviously, our big concern is making sure that they're properly, you know, insured, we're indemnified, that the district is actually listed as being covered, as an additional insured. That, now here we get back to, I probably should have brought this up on the service animal, are we going to require, and again, I think because this is the foundation, we do require that service, animal trainers, parents or guardians that are accompanying the dogs, they do have to have their background. So if that is good to go, that's in, under section 2C2. That's where that comes in. So, but otherwise, there's a lot of they're fairly similar. They have to be controlled on a leash at all times. They have to be healthy. The handlers or the parent have to clean up after the animal. Any damage is the responsibility of the employer, handler of the therapy dog. So,
So it requires a registration with an organization that evaluates the
correct.
therapy dog. I mean, Do we have any idea who that organization is?
There's that.
Or is there more than one, or?
I've been to a lot of puppy training recently, and there are, any certified trainer can do a test to certify a dog as having the skills of a therapy dog. So it's pretty, I think it's actually pretty,
And we would
Broad.
want that, because.
Well, no, I
we should
think
have
we definitely
everybody's
want
dog
that.
in
I was
school.
thinking that, you
Is there
know,
one organization? Yeah.
the fear I have a little bit is, you know, when people were bringing all their dogs on the airplanes all the time and saying they were support dogs, and like, all you had to do was go online and buy an orange vest and you could take your dog on. That doesn't strike me as what we want. I mean,
Right, I mean, these dogs are, the ones, we have three, one at, Beaver Meadow, one at Broken Ground, and one at, Abaddon. And, they're all therapy dogs, all registered, and with an insurance carrier, and naming this Concord School District. And then we worked with Primex to make sure, you know, I mean, if the dog gets riled up and accidentally bites somebody, you know, whose responsibility is that? Who's liable for that? That was
Right.
a concern to us. We worked with Primex to make sure that what we had as coverage and what the dog owners had, the handlers, dog owner, whatever, had the appropriate insurance.
Okay.
The second question that came up, just for your edification, is that the question was, should the district be paying for the insurance, given that they support youngsters? So, you know, that's where we left it. The three dogs that we have all have some type of insurance.
From them
Yes. Well, no, let me clarify
or
that.
through Primex?
We always have Primex.
Yeah.
I believe, I could be wrong, but I think one of the PTAs paid for it.
Okay. Do we have a policy then that says dogs that are not therapy dogs are not allowed in school buildings?
We have
Mascot dogs?
We have a policy in school. We have a policy on animals in school. I don't off the top of my head remember all the details. I will look at it, but we do have a process for animals in school because for the same reasons, allergic reactions, sticking your finger in the mouse cage and getting, you know how that goes, right?
so a teacher can't just
Right.
bring their pet dog.
But we have curriculum. We just hatched tons of little chickens.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Chicks that are going to
Exactly.
owners.
I'm still traumatized by that lesson in elementary school, but that's a story for another day.
What was that?
I said I'm still traumatized by that lesson in elementary school.
The chickens hatching?
They didn't all hatch.
Oh, that happens.
Well, we
Yeah.
do experience that. I just want you to know when I visit classrooms.
It's a cycle of life.
Yeah, the teachers handle it very well. I will say that, and the kids are very knowledgeable about it because they tell you when you come in.
Teaching moment.
Teaching moment.
Teachable.
Do we,
Uh,
I
So
I
that
do
was
a-
the only question that really came up about this
Okay.
policy that was concerning, but quite frankly, working with Primex, working with the individuals, we seem to have handled that.
There's a period missing in the second last sentence in the second paragraph.
I've already noted it. I will gladly do technical edits.
And then my
Some
question
reason we
becomes,
forget periods.
my other question, as I'm reading through this, I didn't see it clearly. Do we do this every year? Is it an annual
Yeah,
requirement?
they annually have to send us
Okay, so annual.
information that they
So
do,
we should
that they
say
have.
We
shall
should say
submit
that.
proof annually.
Yeah.
Shall
Yeah.
annually submit proof.
Yep.
The sentence without a period, what did the sentence used to be?
Where are you, Kara?
In paragraph 2 of the intro
Oh, yeah,
paragraph,
there it is, yeah.
therapy dogs are the, and then in red, personal property of the employer or handler. What did the sentence used to say? Therapy dogs are the,
I don't know where you are. Are you under, let me see where you are. Therapy dogs.
right here, and presumably the red is new language, right?
Therapy dogs are the personal property of the employee or handler.
So originally did it say therapy dogs are the coolest?
Right, therapy dogs are the best.
Yeah.
Strike best,
Yeah.
add personal
Therapy
property
dogs
of the
are
employer or
fun.
handler. I'm just curious what the
And are
sentence
no,
used.
and are not owned by the district.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, so the red is existing language, but
No,
we,
the red is the new language.
No, it said therapy dogs are not owned by the or not the
Right,
property
they're-
of the district.
Right,
Is
is
that what
that's
you're
the
saying?
old one.
right, the
Therapy
old one
dogs-
is therapy dogs are the personal property of the employer handler, so that is
And are not
existing
owned.
language. And then we
Correct.
struck and
I-
are owned.
And are not owned by the district, because it seemed redundant,
That is redundant, yeah.
so that's why I struck it.
Okay.
Well then,
Okay.
with the change of adding a period and adding annually, I will move policy 790.
And I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Out of curiosity, not extending this meeting at all, but what policy is the one on on just having animals in school?
I don't have my list.
I don't.
It's in our list of policies, does it apply to?
Yeah.
It should
Go
be.
to the-
Is it
They
under
all are.
Are
district?
you in the
or-
district?
Did you bring your spreadsheet, Jim?
Yeah, if you go to the
Didn't bring it.
SAU
Really
website.
big.
It's really big.
If you go to the SAU website and go to,
Policies.
policies under school board, and it's
90,
probably in the instruction
576.
section.
That was what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Is it
I
which
think you can
section?
search under like the full policy umbrella though, for keywords.
Mobile version is really hard to.
I know, it's,
It doesn't work really well.
No, I didn't bring my computer down tonight, I don't know why I didn't do that.
last day of school, first day of summer.
Must be,
Yeah.
huh?
I'm still looking. I can look it up. It's not important. Please don't hold up this meeting for that.
Okay, we won't. Karen, anything else that you wanted to bring up?
No, that is it. I will make the changes or we'll get the changes made and have them ready for a first read for
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
July
good.
full board.
Yeah, we have a July meeting, so we'll bring those to I'll add those to the board's, the executive committee will look at the agenda.
Yeah, I like
The
that.
question I have, Bob, was the 31st is the next meeting scheduled of July.
Right,
And, we're, Karen's off. I'm just coming back from vacation.
okay.
I will
I'm
not be
wondering if
here.
we could put it off.
Pam will not be here.
Would
Yeah.
you mind moving it into August?
Not at all. When's the next one we have in August? I'm trying to
Well,
remember that.
I don't know that yet, because I
don't
haven't
have it.
done the
Oh, we haven't
August
done-
we
calendar.
haven't
yet.
done
I was
August
gonna
calendar
do
yet.
Monday
That's right.
night, but,
We haven't done
I would
August.
guess sometime, out in the middle of August.
Are there gonna, Karen, do you know of any important ones that are gonna be coming up in the next?
Title IX's still not out, so we're okay there. I'd like to look at field trips. It's just something that's been out there, and we've had a couple of issues arise, so that may be, but no, I don't have anything pressing at the moment. There's new guidance on seclusion in schools.
We're gonna look
Um,
at seclusion in, at our retreat, John brought it up, we have some new language around, seclusion and restraint, so,
So that's later in August,
Yeah.
your retreat?
Yeah.
yeah, 9, 10, 11.
So you wanna,
I just need some time, we'll
Yeah,
also
so why
wanna
don't we-
talk about field trips a little bit more with them.
I don't know what people's vacation schedules are, but.
Middle of August, I'll be taking kids to college.
One side of the country.
We'll just all
to
do
the
our
other.
best, we'll pick a date,
Yeah.
we'll do our best.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, just pick a date and we'll,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
just
we'll
say
have
we
a
go.
date.
vacation, Glenn?
mine's in July, so.
You,
August, middle August.
middle August.
I mean, I could do it, we have the 21st,
I was gonna say,
the
maybe the,
23rd, the 28th, or the 30th. I mean, there's
No,
One,
the
two,
30th
21st
is the
doesn't work for
first
me,
day
but-
of school.
first day of school.
Already missing the last day of school.
maybe like the
Bad month.
23rd, maybe like the 23rd,
The 23rd,
something like
Yeah.
that, see how that works.
okay. Yep, we're working on the agenda Monday.
Okay.
Any other business?
Any word on scheduling those hearings?
Oh, those have been settled.
Settle.
Oh, okay,
Everything's been settled, so we don't have any
okay, great.
pending
Yeah.
grievances.
And on that note, I would like to strive for more consistent communication around that information, because I found out about it through someone else, and so I don't know if there's a more consistent way of just letting us know, because I, like Pam, was like waiting for the hearing, you know, or like something that was coming down the pike and then it went away, but I didn't know it went away.
Well, it went away because I couldn't get everybody at the table.
Right, and it's
No.
fine, like,
Yeah.
I'm more than happy not to sit through
Yeah.
more meetings than we need to, but,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
will, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's a
when-
game
Yeah.
of
Just
telephone happening.
When it happens, we just.
it
need to know
happened
it.
so quickly, you
Yeah.
know, that
Mhm.
I was told that they would not be able to make that meeting and then,
Yeah.
so it
I
was,
hear ya.
I know,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
we
And
will,
I'm
I'll
not-
work,
yeah.
I will work on that.
No problem. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'm gonna
We
take
all
one of them
move
as a
it, all of
motion
us.
and a
Okay.
second.
Sounds good.
Pam is a second, and all in favor
thought he
say
was
aye.
moving.
Aye.
I thought he was.
You
moving
were
it.
saying I'm making a motion. You
I thought you
said-
made
you thought
the
he made the
motion.
motion. didn't you?
So made.
Yeah.
Made
Still can't
again.
find that animal.